Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again. And today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So in this one, we're taking a look at the Dark Avengers season review. Got some pretty cool cards coming out this month, so as usual, we're going to go over them, and we're going to be going over which of the cards and weeks I think are the best use for your resources. Now, it's no secret, December had some pretty bad spotlights. The cards are pretty good for the Rivals season, and looking back at my prior predictions for them, I was pretty happy with how my predictions landed. I'll throw that up on screen right now if you're interested, but the TLDR was, I think I got it mostly right. The only thing I think I really got wrong from last season's predictions was Penny Parker and Luna Snow probably should have been swapped. Penny ended up being better than I thought she would, and Luna ended up being a bit worse. So aside from those two card swaps, I feel like I predicted the other cards pretty accurately for how they played out upon release. So here's hoping that goes well again this time. It is worth noting in the graphic we have here for this season though, Kang has been replaced. They still haven't reworked Kang. They recently commented that they don't have a rework they like yet, and so he is being replaced with Miss Marvel in the spotlight for the final week of the season. Other than that, all of the other things here are correct. So let's talk about the spotlight weeks. Victoria Hand, Grandmaster, and Kate Bishop Hawkeye leading up week 1. It is worth noting that we are going to be getting a change to the spotlight system this month with the random duplicate slot awarding 2K tokens instead of 1K. However, that change isn't going to be arriving until the first patch, which I believe is scheduled for January 14th. So if you can time it right, the patches usually come out 2 or 3 hours before the daily rollover happens. So if you want to open caches to get Victoria Hand or the other cards during that first week, but you don't want to risk getting 1K tokens out of a duplicate, you could wait till the final day of that week, update your game with the patch, and then if you do get a duplicate, you will be getting 2K instead of 1K tokens. Definitely something worth considering. In terms of the card quality, I think the first week is probably the best week of the bunch. Victoria Hand looks like a pretty solid card and might even spawn a bit of a new archetype around her. Grandmaster, never been the craziest meta card, but has been having a little bit more success recently, especially in things like discard. And then Kate Bishop Hawkeye is making her first appearance to the Spotlight Caches, been a very powerful 2-drop for a long time, and it's the first time she is coming to Spotlights after being a Season Pass card last year. So in terms of just general quality for the weeks, I think week 1 is probably the best week overall if you're getting at least 2 new cards. Then we have Moonstone, Black Swan, and Nocturne. Again, all pretty decent cards. We'll get into the new card evaluations themselves shortly here, but I think Moonstone's decent. Black Swan, best card of the bunch here. Very good in some bounce decks. He's playing some Thanos decks, but probably the place that's been most popular is the Moon Girl She-Hulk style of deck, which might see a little bit of an adjustment with Victoria Hand as well. And then Nocturne's been pretty good, but there have been so many good 3-drops that have come out in the last few months that she has fallen by the wayside a bit. Still not a bad card, but not the goated 3-drop slot that she used to be for sure. Bullseye seems like a great addition to discard. The other 2 cards of the week are kind of unrelated, but both still good cards in their own right, particularly if you like playing Zoo. They're not bad ones worth picking up, but they don't see a whole lot of play outside of that archetype. And then last and probably least, we have Ares, Miss Marvel, and Misery. Ares seems like a good addition to the Scar deck. Miss Marvel is unfortunately just kind of bad. And Misery seems like very niche, but does have a bit of a role in some of these mill archetypes you see popping up from time to time. So obviously, which of these weeks is best for you will depend on the cards you're missing, as well as the types of decks you enjoy playing. But I think in terms of overall generic card quality, week 1 looks like the winner to me, and the order of the rest will probably vary quite a bit depending on which types of decks you like to play. If you enjoy Surtur Scar stuff, the Ares week probably has value to you. If you enjoy Discard or Zoo, the Bullseye week does, and Moonstone will probably be better for Patriot, or if you want a bit of extra support for the Victoria Hand card creation stuff. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the individual cards here and where I am rating them. First up, we have Iron Patriot, and to probably no one's surprise, the Season Pass card here is going to be my lone S tier card of the season. It just seems really good. This card seems very, very powerful. 2-3 for 2, pretty much the generic best in slot stat line for the vast majority of 2-drops, and the upside of the effect on this card is very powerful for multiple reasons. Anytime you're cheating a lot of mana, that's usually a good thing. The majority of mana cheat cards have been very good in the game. I think a recent one that might stick out to a lot of players is something like Anti-Venom. That card has been really strong, even though it is often setting the card to 0 power, unless you have a way of getting that power back with something like Luke Cage or Shadow King. It's still just really good to get a powerful effect from a higher cost card at a reduced rate, and that is exactly what Iron Patriot's going to do too. Now, this card will definitely have some variance to it. Not every 4, 5, or 6 cost card is good. There are a lot of bad ones. But it turns out when you reduce 4 cost off of those cards, they get significantly less bad, and it makes the good ones even better. The variance in what this card can generate also makes it trickier to play around. And to me, a card like this definitely seems like the type of card that you're going to get a lot of cube equity out of, as you'll be generating cards that your opponent can't realistically play around all the time, since they're not going to be in your deck regularly. He also seems like the type of card where you can generically splash this into a lot of decks. You don't specifically have to build around him too hard, though you definitely will be rewarded for building around him with things like Juggernaut or Hydra Bob or other ways of just getting more power to follow up his lane on turn 3 or after whatever turn you end up playing him on, so you can get that reduced cost card. If you don't get the reduction, it's kind of a 2-3 that's not doing very much, but that's okay. There are a lot of 2-3s that have kind of a conditional effect that don't do a lot in certain scenarios, and they're still perfectly playable. But the upside here is very high. It seems worth building around, and it can go in a wide variety of decks. I definitely expect to see a tick up in things like Juggernaut upon the day of release for this card. So yeah, to me, he seems far and away the best of the bunch that we're getting in January. Next up is Bullseye. Bullseye is my lone A tier pick. And honestly, this month as a whole, I think, is pretty good for the game because all these cards seem pretty good. But aside from Iron Patriot, a lot of them are much more deck specific. So these aren't going to be cards you see show up in a lot of different decks. Rather, they're going to be supporting a specific kind of archetype. And I think that's usually a good thing because, one, there are already a lot of like generic good cards in the game. We just got one in Rocket and Groot. And I think that having these more archetype specific ones makes it a little easier on players in terms of reducing the FOMO a bit. Because if you're not a discard player, it doesn't matter that Bullseye is a really good card. You're probably not going to want to pick this one up. Well, on the flip side, if you are a discard player, this might be your most hyped card of the month. And the one thing you know you're guaranteed going to spend those resources on. I think the card seems very good. So 3/3 activate, discard all the cards that cost 1 or less from your hand. Afflict that many different enemy cards with -2 power. So what I like about this card is it fills in a nice spot in the discard curve. Originally, I think it was a 4-drop, and then it was kind of competing with Dracula a bit, but before release, they took it down to a 3/3, and I think that's kind of the perfect spot for a card like this. The main things you're going to be targeting, obviously, are going to be swarms. Swarms are your big one. You can get a lot of them, get that extra power, make more swarms, as well as Scorn, who gets progressively bigger every time it is discarded, gives you some additional power on your side, and Bullseye will be enabling some more negative power there as well. So this card seems pretty good. I mean, the obvious like nut draw with it is on turn 1 or turn 2, you discard a swarm with something like Colleen or Blade. Then turn 3, you play Bullseye. Turn 4, you play Dracula. Turn 5, you play MODOK, and then activate Bullseye after the MODOK, which will give you even more swarms, even more Scorn discard procs, and just afflict a bunch of negative power upon your opponent's side. And it's not like discard isn't already a really good deck in the metagame right now. It's probably more playable than it's been in quite a while, ever since the addition of Malekith. So yeah, discard fans do be eating with this one, and I think just the amount of power swing that this card enables is going to be fairly strong, and it could even fill out some of those awkward curves where, let's say you miss a 4-drop, maybe you can weave in a Bullseye and a Blade or something on turn 4 as well. Just seems like a fairly flexible and decent card with a bunch of power output potential, though it is going to be very limited in terms of the archetypes that will want something like this. It really just is the traditional discard deck. Maybe you'll see someone experiment with a different version of discard, but for now, it seems like Swarm and Scorn are going to be Bullseye's best friends, and it seems like he is a powerful addition to an already pretty strong archetype. Next up, we have Victoria Hand. So I'm pretty excited for this card, mainly because it seems like the type of thing that encourages a style of deck that we haven't seen in a long time, probably since the early days of Marvel Snap. think everyone has a soft spot for the old card generation Devil Dino decks that we all played in the early Pool 1, Pool 2, Pool 3 days before you had too many cards in your collection. And this seems like a card that is trying to appeal to that type of archetype and give it a bit of a boost. I, for one, am excited to try and mess around with like Sentinel Quinjet stuff for the first time in a very long time. So she is a 2/3 ongoing. Your cards that were created in your hand have +2 power. She has a bit of a unique interaction where she is actually granting that +2 power to the cards in hand. It's not just shown as kind of like a temporary buff like we see with the estimation of like Null's power or other ongoings power. She's actually giving you the 2 power to hand while she is on the field. So that could be relevant in fringe case scenarios, like maybe against a Silver Samurai. But in practice, you're probably not going to see that come up in game all too much. Nonetheless, I like this card quite a bit. I think the type of archetype it's trying to breathe some new life into is one that hasn't been seen in a very, very long time. And I'm hopeful that she'll make it a bit more viable of a strategy, kind of like we saw with Scream, where Scream enabled a totally new version of the move your opponent's cards type of deck. That had previously fallen out of favor a long time ago. I'm hoping Victoria Hand does something similar here. She also obviously has synergy with Iron Patriot, the pass card, where the thing you generate off of it will get some of that additional bonus power. But this card definitely seems like the type of thing where you want to run a lot of lower cost cards, maybe reduce them with Quinjet and then just spam them out across the board to get that max value of the Victoria Hand buff. You could even copy her with something like Moon Girl or Frigga, and then the copy will get a buff. Having 2 of these, getting +2 to all your other generated stuff is super cool. So I like the design of this card a lot. I'm not super sure where it's going to land. I think it's a fairly powerful effect, but it remains to be seen how well the other cards in this deck end up doing, if they can push this up enough. Who knows, maybe we'll even see some experimentation with this in something like a Wiccan shell. I know some players were messing around with a Devil Dino style Wiccan thing, and I could definitely see Victoria Hand finding a place there. So I'm excited to see what this card does, and I think it will be fairly strong if that kind of deck is your type of thing. Then we have Ares, a 4/6 on reveal. Compare the power of the top 3 cards of both decks. If your total is higher, get +6 power. So yeah, this card is pretty simple, straightforward, but it is a 4/12 pretty often. If you're building your deck in a way where you're likely going to hit its condition. Old Hearthstone heads might remember the Joust mechanic. That's what this essentially is. It does not show you the cards. There is a little animation, and it shows you the power total for the 3 cards on each of you and your opponent's decks, but you don't actually get to see the cards. I know that's something a lot of people were wondering about, because that could have been a way to make this card better. You get some information, but there's no information here aside from the power totals. And in terms of homes for this card, I think this one's going to be very straightforward. It's just going to be the Scar deck, I think. So yeah, Surtur Scar is still a really powerful deck. It's one you don't see quite as much of higher up in Marvel Snap, but I don't think it's because the deck is bad. I think it's just a fairly linear deck, and a lot of higher up players just got bored of it faster. But if you just like slamming down a bunch of big dudes and getting the free Scar and stuff, this definitely seems like a card you're going to want, as the odds of you actually hitting the effect and having bigger numbers than your opponent are probably going to be pretty high in the Scar deck, given how many 10 power cards you have. It should be pretty difficult for your opponent to beat you and prevent you from getting that +6 power. And so it seems like a natural new offering for that type of deck, but it's not going to dramatically change how that deck is played. I expect it to play largely the same. It'll just have this as a new offering, which can be a slightly higher power total than the normal 4/10s you're used to dealing with. And then Moonstone. I've seen a lot of people down on this card, and I do think it's kind of niche, but I think it has potential to be powerful in the niches it finds itself. So it's a 4/6 ongoing, has the ongoing effects of your 1, 2, and 3 cost cards here. So yeah, Moonstone definitely seems kind of niche. There aren't a ton of like cheap ongoing effects you're really going to appreciate getting that doubling up off of. Most of the time you want to copy an ongoing effect, it's usually a higher cost card, like a Blue Marvel or a Gore or something along those lines. But there are a few cheap ongoing cards that I think will be quite good with this card. For one of the previous cards we mentioned, Victoria Hand, I think this could be the lone higher costed card in a low cost Victoria Hand deck, using her to double up on Victoria Hand's effect to get even more buffs to all your other small hand-generated cards. but I don't think that's going to be the primary home for this card. There is one place I think that very much will appreciate a card like this, and that's going to be Patriot. The 4-drop slot has been the weak spot in like Patriot Ultron lists for a really long time, but that eventually changed with the addition of Anti-Venom and Malekith, which helped round it out a bit. And I think Moonstone is going to fill a similar kind of role there, where essentially you're just using this to double up on your Patriot as your main thing, or even just a Dazzler, as that's pretty good there as well. If you want to get extra cute with it, you could go Patriot, Moonstone, and then copy Moonstone with a Mystique, which would then get copied again off of the Moonstone, giving you a whole lot of Patriot buffs, or you could even slam an Onslaught down on that lane as well, which some of the Anti-Venom versions of Patriot had already been running. So I think this will be a neat card that's worth experimenting with, but I do struggle to see a place that really values this kind of effect outside of Ultron Patriot lists, as well as maybe some Victoria hand shenanigans with a low-cost curve. Outside of that, I just don't think a 4/6 with this kind of effect is going to be doing a whole lot. I'm sure some people experiment with this in Spectrum. It doubling up an Ant-Man or something like that isn't necessarily bad, but I think it's just going to be not exactly what those kinds of decks are going to be needing, as the Spectrum decks have fallen out of favor a long time ago. But who knows, maybe this card's release will end up with them reverting that -1 power nerf Spectrum got many months ago. Regardless, I do think it is probably the weakest and most niche card of the month. I don't think it's necessarily as bad as I've seen some people think it is. It's just a very niche application, with Patriot being the best home for it, I think, by far. And yeah, it's going to wrap it up for our Dark Avengers season review. Shortly after this goes up, I'll be streaming it live, testing out some Iron Patriot and Victoria hand. And overall, I'm pretty excited for the season. Definitely looks like one I am going to be having quite a bit of fun with. Before we close it out, though, I do want to show the cards that are currently scheduled for February, just so you have an idea for your Spotlight Cache planning stuff. Not going to go super deep on these cards, but there is a whole lot of bounce-related card support coming next month with Joaquin Torres and Red Wing, Diamondback for some Affliction support, and Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross for drawing your big 10+ power cards. In terms of card reruns, we have Makari and Namora in week 1, Blink and Nebula week 2, with this being Blink's first appearance in Spotlights, Baron Zemo and Loki on week 3. This will be Zemo's first appearance in Spotlights as well, and we recently got a developer answer that they are probably going to be buffing or changing Loki at some point in the future, so I imagine they will probably try and time that before or around his Spotlight re-release. And then the final week we have Nimrod and Phoenix Force, so just keep that in mind in terms of which cards you might be going after in this month and next month. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Which of the cards are you excited for and looking to pick up? I'd love to hear it. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.